Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Limitless Ladies Network, where our mission is to help women build holistic, empathetic self-care and well-being. Just a quick disclaimer before we actually get started. Please note that this content is provided for general informational purposes only. It is not advice nor intended to be a substitute for professional medical or legal advice. This information is to be used at your own discretion. So those seeking any treatment or legal advice or anything specific to any issues that we're talking about should really seek a qualified professional. We make no representations, no warranties, and nor do we assume any liability for the content herein. So thank you all for joining us today. We really do appreciate you taking this time for us to talk about how we can empower some women to navigate the dating world as it has become quite challenging these days. From online dating to in-person connections, we actually have retired detective Alison Sullivan here today, which I'm super excited for her to share with us some real life experiences on how to keep us safe. So whether you're in high school, college, working professional, a single mom, recently divorced, and actually looking to get back into the dating scene, I think we've got some information that you can find to hopefully help keep your heart safe this Valentine's. So welcome, Alison.
Thank you.
All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a retired detective from Hartford County, Connecticut, and I served 20 years with a municipal department. And I have two teenagers, and I am single and have been in the dating scene for several years now, and have learned a lot, both in my experience as a detective, as an investigator, and in my personal life, and as a mom of teenage kids.
Yeah, that's quite the extensive background. Between yourself being single dating is challenging, and then also teenagers as well. So this is great information for you to share with us.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
in your line of work, I'm sure that you've come across several different patterns of behavior that may be red flags for some people. So why don't you share some of those with us?
Okay, I would say, broadly speaking, some red flags when you meet someone initially that you don't know at all, particularly if you're using dating apps. When you meet people who have expressed the fact that they're new to the area or that they're willing to relocate. If they say that they are currently overseas, in particular, that would be a situation I would just run from. But especially if you're talking to someone that lets you know that they are brand new to the area, they don't know anyone in the area that you're in, they don't have any family, any connections. I'm not saying across the board that's a problem, but that can potentially be a real red flag.
That makes total sense.
Yep.
Some
Some
things
other
that you
red
just don't.
flags would be anyone asking you for money of any kind for any reason, even if you've already connected with them and you guys have a really good rapport together. If their request for money for any reason at all, even if it sounds totally illegitimate, I would run fast.
Oh yeah, you don't want someone trying to scam you right away, right? And especially
Yeah,
with some of those online dating things, I'm sure that that comes up quite frequently, right? Like they kind
sometimes
of
it does.
get into the nitty-gritty with you, pretending like they really like you, and then all of a sudden, hey, by the way, my car broke down.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. That's definitely good advice. So if we think about Valentine's Day coming up and potential dates that are going to be happening, right? What are some things like prior to dates that people could do?
Okay. Well, I would say, broadly speaking, it's a good idea to plan a phone call before meeting up with someone. If you just met someone, let's say at a show or a networking event or through work or on a dating app, it's a good idea to have a phone call first. That way you can feel out what the person's like and get a better sense of whether or not you want to spend time with this person. The second thing I would say is after that phone call, when you plan to meet up, I would choose a place in public that you're really comfortable with and that you know is in a safe area so that you're comfortable there. And before meeting up, I would strongly suggest you do the following. You share a screenshot with a reliable friend, so not just any friend, but a reliable friend of the person's name and their cell phone number that you're chatting with. And then let that friend know, hey, this is where we're meeting, this is when we're meeting, and establish a check in time. And the check in time does a few things. It gives you a way for your friend to know that things are going okay and you're safe. And it also gives you an out if things are going terribly and you just want an excuse to get out of there. So I think the check-in time can be really helpful. A few other things I would recommend, get yourself to the date. So do not rely on someone that you do not know to pick you up. Pretty much, I would say ever. Getting in the car of someone else that you don't know and don't know well is really riskier than people realize. And so whether it's Uber or public transportation or your own vehicle, I would get yourself there. And I personally commit to one drink. So
Mm,
especially on a date with someone that you don't know, it's
yeah.
risky to get buzzed. I don't use controlled substances or marijuana or things like that, but people who do smoke, I would strongly suggest going to that date sober and committing to one or fewer drinks, only because you want to be able to read people as best as possible. And to do that when you're buzzed or drunk is really difficult to do. And lastly, I would strongly suggest not inviting this person to your place, to your apartment, your condo, and not going to their place until you really know them quite well. So, not to terrify people, but there are cases that we investigated where you're going to someone's house and unbeknownst to you, they actually have video recordings set up in their bedroom, in their living room, and you don't know what you could potentially be getting into. So think about inviting someone that you don't know to your place or going to their place as a really high risk activity that you should wait until you really have established a working knowledge of who this person is and what they're like.
Yeah, I mean, that's one that I think being old school, I guess, I'm aging myself, right? But you never really thought that that was going to be an issue if you just met up with somebody where they lived, because then you kind of felt like you got a sense as to how that person lives their life on a daily basis, right? But today, there's just so many different people out there that you just can't trust. I mean, I heard a story of a woman that went on a date with someone. I think she had met him online and went back to her house. And the guy, I don't know if she planned on leaving him outside, but he was like, "Oh, my phone charge, my phone's dead. Can I charge it inside?" And, she lets him in and goes to get a charger in her bedroom and then comes back down, right? Gives him the charger and then goes back to her room. Thank God she was smart enough to do that, right? And then she basically ends up in the, oh, hold on. I'm just trying to, if you wouldn't mind blocking your video, Lindsay. Thank you. So she goes back up into her bedroom, right? And then this guy goes back downstairs, supposedly charging up his phone. And then, he comes back upstairs, knocking on her bedroom door, and he's like, this isn't working, it's not the right cord, whatever. And all of a sudden, he starts to get really irate with her. And so she calls 911 and she just stays in her bedroom, thank goodness, because he was just getting really like loud banging on the door, like he was going to break in. And so she stayed in her bedroom until the cops showed up and they went up to her bedroom. When she came back downstairs, he had plastic all over her living room.
I
It's
heard
like,
about this.
it's just crazy that, if she would have
Yeah,
went back downstairs, who knows what would have happened to her.
right. So the phrase that I like to use is digital hitchhiking. So if you think about you're going through a maybe a higher crime neighborhood in your car and you're driving and you see someone on the side of the road that really looks questionable and they actually put their thumb out to hitchhike and get a ride from you, you probably would not think about picking them up. But these people that we meet off the internet, off these dating apps, are literal. It's like digital hitchhiking.
Yeah.
You're connecting with and picking up someone who you know literally nothing about. And the internet lets all of us lie, you know. I
Mm,
could say that I'm 29. I could say I weigh 112 pounds. That was a few decades ago. I could say all kinds of things about myself.
right.
I could say I'm financially stable, I am divorced, and those things might not be true. And people, particularly on dating apps, you have to be really, really careful with. That's why I would caution people against inviting them over or going to their place until you've
Yeah.
really, really gotten to know the person.
So a quick question. You mentioned like having that phone call with them prior to. Are there any certain questions that you can suggest would be ones that might invoke them kind of giving themselves up in a way where you could quickly identify that there might be a bad character?
You know, what I do is I really just try to plan a phone call
Yep.
so that it's clear. It's almost like a phone call date. I'll say, hey, would you like to set a time where we both have the ability to get to know each other on the phone? Old school, we could commit to a 30-minute phone call.
Yep.
And because it's a planned thing and we're giving some time for it, I would just say be yourself and take the time to listen
Mhm.
and feel the person out. And the other thing I would say is if you're in a crazy rush to not be single, that really tactically puts you in a bad place because you might ignore even some bright red flags when you're in a really totally impatient with being single. So you're better off taking your time and learning how to be content alone and not to be in a rush. Uh, that's my suggestion.
Totally agree. Because I was single, in between marriages, right, for 5 years, and you get to the point where you want to be in that relationship and feel safe and secure, and you're looking for love in all the wrong places, right? You overlook some of those qualities in people that you might not have realized or, thought of initially. So,
Yeah. Some other questions I would consider asking, maybe not in that initial phone call or the first date, but some follow-up questions you definitely want to think about are you technically still married or are you divorced? And also, are you still cohabitating with your former partner or former spouse? And it's not just a question for yourself because you want to know if this guy is truly available or not, but you really want to be careful with the ex. And
yeah.
we did have some cases where we got some very angry current girlfriends, current spouses lash out against the new love interest. And that person had no idea that this person was still actually living with their spouse or girlfriend. So those are important things to clarify.
Yeah, I agree. I'd also heard another story of a woman that was dating a guy for like 2 years, but he was married with kids,
Yeah.
still married with children. And it's
Yep.
just kind of crazy that people, and it's not the first time that he had done that to that particular person, right? It's like seems like people just get on these dating sites and they're dating multiple people all at the same time, and it's hard to weed through who's really a good quality person.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also just have some guidelines for dating apps. I think it's a good idea to be just more cautious with your profiles on dating apps,
Mhm.
not using your last name, not, I would suggest stating what you do for business, but not your business name or the company that you work for. And I would be careful in photos, not to include identifying information like the town you're in.
Mhm.
Let's say there's a well-known restaurant, a photo of you. This is my favorite spot. That's not something I would do.
Right,
I
right.
wouldn't include photos that include your company or business name, your kids, obviously, but also if you have a beautiful but really expensive watch or jewelry, I would not put those in dating app photos because some people in dating apps are actually looking to commit robberies and things like that,
Mhm.
and they want to set up someone that looks like they do have money. Um,
Yeah, that's actually
and
very good advice.
another thing I wanted to add is about saying no when you're not interested in someone. It's not easy to do. We don't like to disappoint people or let them down, but I've found in my experience that it's really best to say no politely and upfront, very clearly. Um, it's not that easy in person. That can be very awkward, but what I do is I wait until after a date and I say via text, hey, I just wanted to let you know I had a great time. I think you're fantastic. I just wasn't feeling the connection. And I'm going to politely pass, but I hope you find someone great. And that way, you're very clear and very positive that it's a no.
Yeah.
And if they say anything back other than thanks you too, or hey, I wish you luck as well, then I just block them, promptly block them.
Yeah. That's that's very smart.
Yep.
It's good to cut out early when you realize something. And I think another thing that we sometimes overlook as well is just our own intuition on things. Whether when you meet somebody over the phone, I think you can still get a little bit of sense, like you said, as to how they are, but more so in person. Whereas if you meet somebody and you can kind of gauge if they're lying or if the hairs go up on the back of your neck, right? That typically means that you probably shouldn't be pursuing this particular person for whatever reason. As great looking as they might be, there's got to be something that your gut is telling you not to do it. So listen
Yep,
to that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Also, that's not always evident right away.
Yeah.
So some other cautions that I would suggest would be, if you hit it off with someone and you really have a great rapport and you go on a few dates, but after just a few weeks of getting to know each other, that person quickly becomes possessive
Mhm.
or they display monitoring behaviors. So it turns into something where they're checking in with you almost continually in the morning. Hey, babe, how are you? Where are you? What are you doing today? What are you doing now? What are you doing
Mhm.
later? Things like that are very, very concerning, and I would be very careful. Um, I have a brief story to share about a dating experience I had, and by way of reminder, I'm not only a trained investigator, I took advanced interrogation and interview training. I've also gotten training in identifying micro facial expressions. So I have a lot of experience. So I think of myself as being able to sort out unsavory characters pretty easily. But I met someone on a dating app. We connected pretty quickly. I had the pre-phone call and we just hit it off. And he was very easy to talk to and attractive. Um, we had been texting and talking I probably for a week and a half before we agreed to meet. And before we met up, I did the I checked in with a friend. I shared a screenshot. I said, here's the guy's name, Sal. This is who I'm meeting up with. This is where we're meeting. And I did ask her to check in with me after an hour. So I go to meet this guy and I drive a little ways. I get to the parking lot. I get to the place early. It's at a restaurant. And I'm in the parking lot and I'd like to get to places early just so I can have be together and calm. And he calls me and he said, hey, how's it going? And my first thought was, oh, here we go. This guy's going to cancel. And that was not it. He said, and I remember it was spring and I was having like a ragweed season
Yeah.
reaction. So I'm in this parking lot with my windows cracked and talking to him. And he said, hey, I just wanted to touch base. So excited about our date. And hopefully you'll be here in a few minutes. I just wanted you to know that I do have a few cases pending. It's not anything crazy, but I do have two restraining orders
Oh
and a
my
protective
God.
order against me currently. But I can explain, the judges were assholes and they just didn't like me. But I brought the cases with me. So like I have a briefcase with me with the cases.
Wow.
And I'm in my car like, are you actually kidding me right now? And
Wow.
I'm horrified. And then I remember sneezing really loudly. And then the next thing I heard him say is, "Oh my gosh, is that you?" So he heard me. He was literally across the parking lot, heard me, looks up, sees me in the car. Now he walks over, opens my car door, and it's like, oh my word. So we go into this restaurant and the hostess is like, hey, the table's not ready yet. It's going to be a few minutes. So we're at the bar. I have a Diet Coke and my head is spinning. He has a briefcase out. He's taking these cases out. And I just felt so foolish. Like, how did I get myself in this situation? Are you just
Wow.
kidding me? But I made the difficult choice when the hostess came over and said, hey, your table's ready. I'm ready to see you guys. I just said, you know what? I'm just gonna, I don't want to waste your time or mine. And it's just a no for me. So I appreciate your being upfront with this 2 weeks later. But I'm not even going to sit down for lunch because, and he was definitely offended and put out by that. And I said,
Wow.
I'm just being honest with you. It's a straight no for me. So, I wish you luck. And I left and that was it. And I felt like I had done all the right checks and asked the right questions. And you got to be really cautious, even if you're a couple weeks into it and you think that this could be a decent person, because I sure did.
Yeah. I mean, that story is incredible, especially with your training.
Right.
It happens to all of us.
Right. And you can check people, and we're going to share this with folks, the Connecticut Judicial website, where you can actually check people's criminal history, pending cases. You can look up their name for civil matters to verify whether they're divorced. But this guy was from Massachusetts. So none of that applied. And quite frankly, I felt so confident about the rapport and what he said about himself that I wasn't really hinky and thinking, I better check this guy. I felt pretty confident about it. So
Wow.
yeah.
I mean, so super great of you to have the confidence to be able to say, no, this just isn't going to work for me, right? And actually get up and walk away from this guy. But for other women that might not have that self-confidence because they have low self-esteem and they've been in patterns of relationships with manipulators or whatever it might be, right? It's hard to say no or no thank you even.
Yeah.
So, are there any other tips that you can give if someone's like mid-date and they're just like, all right, you get that hairs back on your neck and you're like, yeah, this is not going to work for me. Like, what's a good way to get out?
I would suggest, and that lunch was an exception. I really would suggest not committing to a meal for a first date because it's a long commitment. You're talking
Yeah.
almost 2 hours. So what I try to do and what I would recommend people try is meeting up for coffee or just a drink and an appetizer. So it's a lower time commitment.
Yeah.
And I find that check-in with a friend is a great out. If I don't like the way that it's going, I mean, I'm fairly confrontational to be honest, so I don't have a problem saying, but not everyone is comfortable with that. So if
Yeah.
it's really tough for you to be upfront in that way, honestly, I would have that friend that's going to do the check-in phone call have a story ready. Like you
Mm,
can pretend that it's your babysitter and that your kid's having some kind of a meltdown or an allergic reaction and you have to go right away.
right.
Or, if it's a coffee meetup and you really don't feel great about it, finish the coffee, offer to pay. If, so that that person doesn't feel like you're indebted in any manner to them and say, hey, I'll be in touch. And then when you've left via text, not phone call is pretty tough. I would say via text, I would do that. I would suggest that direct but polite. You know what? I'm not feeling the connection and I appreciate your time, but it's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
Um, and then I just block people if they're not cooperative. But
Yeah.
that's also a really great reason to not share personal information like where you work, what your address is, not having them over so they don't know where you live,
Mm,
things like that.
yeah. All great advice. So I know that we're kind of towards the end of our half hour here. And we have quite a few ladies that are on. So if anyone has any questions that you'd like to ask Allison directly, we'd be open for you to ask a question. You can either drop it in the chat or you can kind of raise your hand and I'll let you ask. Anyone? Quiet ladies out there today.
I think what I want to reiterate for folks that weren't here at the beginning, the 2 points that I would say most strongly are do not ever get into the car of someone that you don't know. Pretty much ever.
Yeah.
I could share some really scary cases. I don't want to terrify people. I want to educate them, but
Yeah.
think of it like we have tool belts and getting in the vehicle of someone that you don't know is really giving away some of your tools. It's a real risk. And the second thing I would say likewise is inviting someone to your place or going to theirs before you know them fairly well is a huge risk. And And I investigated cases where that risk became really evident in a concerning way.
Yeah. So Jewel had a question about additional advice for online dating. Any
Yep.
great advice there you'd like to share?
Yeah, I shared a little bit in the beginning. So if you have more specific questions about online dating, but just by way of review, and I'm free and available until noon. So anyone who wants to stick around and talk at length about this, online dating it is very risky. And Jewel, I'm not sure if you were here when I described it, but it really is akin to what I call digital hitchhiking. So if you were in a neighborhood you didn't feel safe in or comfortable and you were driving through it with your windows up and doors locked, if you then saw someone on the side of the road hitchhiking, you never in your right mind would pick them up. But really online dating is hooking us up with and inviting people into our world that are it's like digital hitchhiking. You have no idea who that person actually is, what their background is, whether they are really married or not, whether or not they have a criminal history. So taking time to vet the person, and it really does take time because you don't want to come across as a crazy investigator like I have the ability to, where you're asking, 60 questions. How many traffic tickets did you get? Let me see your photo ID.
Make
You
them
don't
fill
want to
out a
be
survey before you go
yeah,
on a date,
you
right?
don't want to be crazy, but it does take time to ask the questions that you want to sort out about whether they're actually single, what their history is. I would really be careful with people who say they're new to the area, willing to relocate, or hey, just moved here 6 months ago. I don't know anyone in the area. I don't have any family in the area. The reason I'm saying that is because something that we saw quite frequently in law enforcement was if you get a bad name for yourself and you develop a reputation as a burglar, as a prowler, as a shoplifter, any category of criminality, right? The easiest thing to do in the States is just to pick up and move, and you just relocate. And quite frequently, we found that particularly people with felony convictions would move quite a bit because they would need to restart in new areas to get jobs and to get into places where people didn't know them or their history. So it really is a risk factor. I'm not saying it's across the board. Some of us are at one point new to an area, and that doesn't make us a bad person, but I'm just saying consider that as a potential risk. Um, and that people are partnered up. Uh, some people are unhappily married or in situations where, let's say, their long-term partner is going through like serious medical challenges and the sexual component of the relationship isn't there anymore. So they're out looking for something they're not getting, but they actually still have a life partner. So there's all kinds of scenarios that I've encountered both personally and in law enforcement. And I would be ready for anything. Keep your eyes open and really take your time getting to know someone in public places. Like my general rule is, I mean, I err on the side of way on the side of caution, but I meet up with someone probably 4 or 5 times in public places before I would consider doing anything beyond that in terms of getting together with someone socially. And I really take my time feeling them out. I mean, it's several months for me of getting to know someone before I would consider going to their place or having them at mine.
That's a good rule of thumb because I was going to ask that, in your opinion, how long you think it should take to really kind of feel somebody out to get that vibe of they're good or bad, you know?
Yeah. And a word of wisdom about ghosting. If someone ghosts you, as crappy as that is, honestly, I think it's a godsend. If someone ghosts you, there's probably stuff going on that you don't even want to know about. They probably have issues or challenges that you're really better off not having on your plate. So it sucks, but it might be the best thing.
Yeah. I mean, everything happens for a reason, right?
Yep.
Sometimes we may not see it right away, but it could be a good sign.
Yep. What about, do you folks have any questions about any specific situations you've gotten yourselves into, or questions about cases related to this that I've investigated, or anything at all that you want to ask while we're here?
Yeah, take the time. Well, we have our expert on the line. While they're thinking, Allison, I can't seem to get to, I know you shared the Google Doc with me.
Yeah.
I don't know that you want to share the whole Google Doc, which I have a link to, or do you have that up where maybe you just want to at least share the couple websites that are in there? Because for some reason, I think because I'm on the Zoom right now, it's not letting me copy the links. Like I have your link for your website ready, but I just wasn't sure if you wanted to actually share the whole Google Doc.
I could not, I'm not that adept at,
If
I wouldn't be
not,
able
what
to
I
do that
can
very
do
quickly.
is after the session, I always do a blog post about whatever webinars that we do and podcasts. I put that up on the website, so I will include the links in that so that everyone will have access to it. So
Okay, great. And to be clear, my website is protectus.solutions, which Tammy's going to share at the end. But when you go on my website and the top bar says insights, those are blog posts of mine. I'm going to share the document, which is basically a cheat sheet of what I've talked about. I'm going to share that document with you guys. I see a question here. Are you familiar with any good open source ways to check into potential partners? Yes. So in Connecticut, it's the state of Connecticut judicial website, and that is in the document that's going to be, Tammy's going to share, you said on your site, and it's going to be
yeah,
on my site as well. When you go to my website under insights, uh, love with a safety net is one of the blog posts, and it's going to have all these. But on the state of Connecticut judicial website, which probably runs similarly to websites in other states, there's a couple ways to run people, but you got to know their last name. And it's not super helpful if you, if they have a really common last name. So if it's John Smith or Jose Rivera, that it's more challenging, honestly. But you can run people for pending cases and convictions in motor vehicle, and you can run them for pending cases and convictions in criminal, and you can run them in on that website under the civil tab. You can actually look up their, if they say they're divorced, you can look up their divorce proceedings. A lot of details, unfortunately. But the thing I would be really careful with, and share this with your friends, is that the fact that someone isn't on one of those websites does not mean much at all. So I know many people who have committed felonies in law enforcement. I know them, not personally, who have never been arrested for a felony, and they definitely don't have felony convictions. That does not mean they are not have not committed felonies. So in Connecticut, you can get charged with a felony, commit a felony, get arrested, charged, convicted, and have that case dismissed. You can have that case erased.
wow,
You can use accelerated rehabilitation, AR, to get that case erased if you behave well for 12 months. So the fact that someone doesn't have a felony conviction on one of these websites where you can verify that information does not mean they're not potentially trouble. So some other suggestions for vetting people or doing research on them. I'll give you an example of how I would run, let's say, a background check that I had to do for our volunteer firefighters. So I would do a basic criminal history check, which you can actually pay to do in Connecticut. You can pay. Every state may be different. I would look into it, but you could call your local police department and ask. You can actually pay to get a criminal history check done on someone if you have their first, last name, and date of birth. You would do this, for example, if you're going to hire a babysitter for your kids.
mhm.
So that's a little bit extra when you're trying to sort out, if you've got 30 options on your dating app, you're not going to pay for a criminal history check, right? But just Google their name. Google their first and last name and look up news. And you would be surprised at how many news articles you might find related to that person.
Wow.
So I do an image search also. And when you do the image search and you keep going, if you can match up that name with their image and it is them, some of those images, when you tap on them, will then take you back to posts that might bring you to a picture of them with their spouse. So really just
Wow.
recently, this attractive guy, tried to match me on Bumble, and very attractive, seemed a little too good to be true-ish. So I started, and he had an unusual first name, and he was a chef. So he didn't say I'm sorry, he did say where he worked. So I start Google image searching him, and after copying his image and searching the image, and then his first name and the chef, and sure enough, he has active and current photos with his spouse on the business site. It's the business Instagram page. So I thought about reaching out to her, and then I'm like, mind your own business, walk away, mind your own business. But so those are some suggestions. The criminal history searches on the state databases, like the Connecticut Judicial website. Search their name for news articles related to them. That's what I did when I was vetting volunteers for the fire department in our town. Image searches, social media searches, and then LinkedIn is helpful. Just know that when you search someone on LinkedIn, you're going to show up as having viewed their profile. But if someone says they work for such and such company, sometimes what I'll do is I'll have a friend connected to a friend. Let's say I'll have my brother's best friend. Hey, can you check this guy's name and this photo
That's a good
in
idea.
LinkedIn? Because I don't care if my brother's best friend's
Right.
name shows up as so-and-so viewed your profile,
Right.
to see, do they really work at this place that they said they work at? And you'll find out.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Have you
Was that helpful,
used,
Anna?
I also dropped in the link to your website and mine as well so that people can kind of Google. Excellent. Thanks, Anna. I'm curious, have you, with all this technology coming out, have you at all used AI to get information on people, and how accurate is it if you have?
I haven't, no.
I'd be curious.
Yeah,
Seems
I'm not sure. I just I've read enough about I've read enough about AI to at least my current belief is that it sounds 80% great and 20% not.
Yep.
So not complete and accurate information, and that makes me cautious.
Yeah. Yep.
But before people need to go, and again, I'm happy to stay here and chat until noon. I would encourage you, if you have a unique situation, a personal situation that you want to talk about, please go to my website and book time with me. I'm happy to talk in detail, lurid detail if needed, and very personally with you about what your unique challenges are in your own personal life regarding dating strategies. Or if you have a friend or a family member that's in a situation where talking with me might be really helpful to them, please go to my website and book time with me.
That is a great service because there are some women out there that are afraid to speak up, right? Or they might already be in a situation and they just need to get some information. So that's great. Any other questions? All right. Well, I want to thank you, Allison, for joining us today.
Yeah.
This has been very informative. So on the cusp of Valentine's Day, whether it's first dates, new loves forming, rekindling of hearts, whatever it might be, I hope that this segment was informative and enlightening for all of you and that you can use this information to help stay safe for yourself, daughters, nieces, whoever it might be. Again, encourage all of you also to check out the Limitless Ladies Network. The link is in the chat along with Allison's website as well. The video will be posted probably by the end of this week. And then we'll also be working on getting the podcast, this same thing in a podcast, updated and out there as well. Check out any current events that are happening. I've got other webinars, not quite on this topic, but other things on holistic things coming up as well, generally on Thursdays. So please sign up for any of those events as well. And we hope to see you again soon. And thank you very much again, Alison.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all ladies for joining us today. Appreciate you.